Hey everyone, welcome back. Today's blog entry is called Getting Off the Couch and Just Doing It. And the purpose behind it is because I wanted to go back about what I talked about in the welcome entry about how people fear to speak and they fear about falling on their face. But really, we need to actually get up and actually do things if we're going to get better. Quite often we tell ourselves, I need another day, I need another week to do this speech, or it's just not ready, I'm not ready. We've all done it. We've all made excuses. And we've just put off that speech for another day. In the Toastmasters world, this typically happens quite often, especially at the very, very last minute. There's usually the hope that someone else will take on that speech with what they call a back pocket speech, where you just happen to have a speech in the back of your pocket that you can give at the last second. But typically those speaking spots tend to disappear into the ether and no one gives a speech that day. One of my favorite speakers, Darren Lucroy, had this 6-word saying: stage time, stage time, stage time. And in essence, what he really means is that you have to just simply get up and do it. You have to simply get up and give that speech. You have to practice, practice, practice. If you don't practice, 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 how are you going to grow? Because if you give that speech today, you've mustered up the courage and you go and you give that speech anyway, you'll be better tomorrow. Guaranteed. Definitely you will. Or you'll be better next week when you're giving another speech. There were times where I've given horrible speeches. And I look back on them as times where I really needed to give them anyway. No matter how bad it was a good thing I gave that speech anyway. Why? Because I looked back on the speech, I thought about it, I reviewed it, and I realized, okay, I screwed up here, I screwed up here, I screwed up here. I got to work on these areas and get better for next time. Or really, I wasn't prepared. So it sort of forced me that, okay, next time, this is what happened last time, I got to do better next time. But in the end, it forces you to get better and it forces you to improve. Last month, I was at a conference for the National Retail Federation. It was their annual conference, and they had a keynoter there who mentioned one thing that was pretty interesting to me. He said that smokers typically try to kick the habit 5 to 6 times on average before they actually succeed in quitting smoking. He said that, if something big like that takes 5 to 6 times to succeed before failure before you succeed, what about the rest of us where there's other things that might be not as big or as bigger than that? It's going to take much more. It's going to take time where you have to actually fail. You have to fail and you have to keep trying and trying again. And speaking is no different. So I look upon failing as a good thing. So I tell you, fail often. Definitely. Yes, it does hurt. Okay, when my dad told me once when I was small, he said that things are temporary and the pain will go away eventually. Now, he was referring to bullies that were trying to kill me at some day, but I think the same thing can apply to speaking as well, especially if you have a hostile audience, right? So getting back to putting speeches off. The way I approach this is that once I book a speech or a speaking engagement, I never cancel. I look at it as I've booked the speech for that day, so I must give it. I crave the opportunity because I crave the opportunity to grow. I tell speakers that I mentor to do the same thing, that if a speech is booked for a certain day, that's the day you have to give it. Even if your speech is only 80% done, give that speech anyway. Just do it. Doesn't matter. If on a speaking day you still feel unprepared, there are a number of ways to actually get prepared. Okay, there's a couple of approaches that I've learned over the years that have actually helped me to give some pretty decent speeches, especially when we have a time crunch. And we all know that there are times where, we're trying to fit so many things into our day and we just don't get the time to actually complete what we're doing. And speeches tend to get brushed off to the side. So here's a couple of things that have helped me a lot. So the first thing is if I'm at work, I find an empty boardroom. Okay, during my breaks or during the lunch hour or even after work, I will make my way to the boardroom and I will give that speech over and over and over again as many times as I can till it's perfected or until my break is done. Now if I'm in the car, that's the perfect time because there's a captive audience, you and the car in front of you. So what I do is I turn off the radio and I use the clock on the radio as a timer to keep track of the speech as well, how long I'm going over or under my allotted time, which we'll talk about in the future as well. And what I do is I give that speech over and over and over to the back of the car in front of me. So it helps out. Now both of these approaches actually help out a lot. What they do is, first, they help me commit my speech to memory, and second, they give me ideas for improving the speech before the engagement. So as Toastmasters, this approach is actually really ideal because our speeches are typically 5 to 7 minutes long in the club. Okay, but for longer speeches, especially if you're giving like a 45-minute speech, I suggest you break up the speech into pieces and practice those pieces on days leading up to the speaking engagement. That way, at least you've committed the speech to memory, the pieces of the speech at least, and you actually get ideas because you're sort of examining those little pieces of the speech specifically. You'll get great ideas out of it and you're focusing on it. If you try focusing on the entire speech at once, you may miss over a few things because you're focused on giving that entire speech and giving it well. So the next time you're feeling like passing up on a speaking opportunity, think about it. Think about how much more you're going to lose by not giving that speech. So get up off the couch and just do it. Bye for now.